discussing, first of all, the NATO capabilities and the European Defence Fund calls. So we always focus on a broader level what the NATO capabilities are needed for the next years. And then within those capabilities, I get excited by a couple of things. First of all, it's the autonomous software stack of drones or unmanned platforms. Currently, there are a lot of new platforms, UAVs, USVs, UGVs being built. So ground vehicles, sea vehicles, or vehicles that are being developed into the air. But currently, the brain of those systems are within the autopilot and within the software that is running on top of those drones.
Welcome to my interview series, The Sourcing Stack, where I speak with venture capital investors from across the ecosystem to understand how they think about markets, emerging technologies, and what it takes to build the next generation of impactful companies. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Tees, Defense Investment Associate at Keen Venture Partners, the radically human venture capital firm based in Amsterdam. Keen recently launched Europe's first dedicated defense and security technology fund, closing over 150 million euros and backing founders building the next generation of defense autonomy, cyber, AI, and security infrastructure across European NATO countries. Tees has been part of that journey from day one, helping build the fund, supporting founders across Europe, and working at the intersection of technology, sovereignty, and resilience. Tees, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Great. Let's jump into the topic, building a stronger Europe. Your headline says, building a stronger Europe. What does that mean in practical terms as a venture investor?
Thank you so much for the first question. This is a sentence I've been saying for already quite some years as well. And why I think it's really necessary, because I think Europe has an enormous amount of engineering talent. It's based on scientific, deep research institutions. And also a lot of the big and best world-class founders are coming from Europe. And I think it's now time to see and look at the industry and what's currently and historically it was always lacking was like the capital infrastructure and the conviction to build again, the conviction to build deep tech and hard tech solutions to solve the critical problems that Europe is facing right now. And that's why I have my sentence to build a stronger Europe, because I really believe that the next frontier of founders will need to put their hands together and trying to build those solutions that will be the hardware or the software. That's also what Keen is able to invest in to be the backbone of the next 5 years of European defense.
Great. That's a powerful way to frame the role of venture capital that can play in shaping the Europe's future. Europe is entering what many call a defining decade for defense and security. Why is this movement different from 5 years ago?
I think from 5 years ago, currently the industry is really shaped by the geopolitical reality. The Russian invasion in Ukraine has shown all the European governments and the society that we cannot be dependent again on America for American technological systems and for their support. We need to do it our own. And therefore, you see like the European governments are spending more than 2% of their GDP each, Poland even getting to 4%. And we need to be able to build more NATO sovereignty and need to be able to work together on projects as well. And therefore, I see that's the biggest difference. In 5 years ago, we saw like a lot of discussions about still on political level, is defense an area where we can invest in, is it necessary? And the geopolitical reality of today has shown us as well in the Middle East that defense is something that the society should be able to understand well, and we need to support the defense capabilities. So therefore, I think that's the biggest reason and the change in the last 5 years.
Got it. Yeah. That shift in geopolitical and technological landscape has clearly influenced how investors approach this sector. Moving on, Keen launched Europe's first dedicated defense and security VC fund. Why was it important to build a focused platform rather than invest opportunistically?
Because I think opportunistic investing is not working in the defense industry. I think in the
Mhm.
defense industry, we're talking about an industry with long sales cycles, with big procurement levels, with an amount of knowledge and expertise and operational expertise you need to have in the industry to really flourish there. So therefore, what I think as well is that we need to build institutional credibility, and we need to build relationships in the industry as well. And that's exactly why Keen Venture Partners as well arise, to be the adoption player, to build a platform not only for founders to give them a certain amount of capital, but also really help them to build those relationships and the institutional credibility across the industry. Because that is a really big difference between opportunistic investing compared to more the defense investing. Because opportunistic investing will be panicking after they understand the amount of sales cycles and complexity there is in the industry. So I think that's a big difference.
Great. Well positioned it was. Now, just to move on, let's talk a bit about the strategy behind the fund itself. So, what gap did you see in the European capital landscape that this fund is designed to fill?
So first of all, I think, as you said before, like 5 years ago, when there was a founder in Europe building something for defense, he could have gotten money from a generalistic VC who really doesn't understand more the complexity and the regulations of the industry, or he could get money from an American VC who went into Europe and trying to found those amazing founders as well. So therefore, there was a big gap for a really dedicated European defense fund that could help scale European companies across Europe. And that's like a financial gap, but also an execution gap. And those two we are trying to fulfill.
Yeah, and that raises the broader question of how we actually define defense innovation in Europe today.
Mhm.
How do you define defense tech in Europe? Is it dual use, purely military, or something broader?
Yeah, so I actually don't really define it as a binary. I see it more like as a spectrum. I think defense is, on the other hand, you have really the military applications dedicated, being built for government to procure them. And we also have now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have the commercial applications being used for artificial intelligence, but also infrastructure, energy systems, batteries, that are all having commercial applications but can be implemented in the military domain. And therefore, you see at the intersection of those, you see like a really big opportunity for defense applications as well. So you're looking at, for example, at resilience technologies, who are, for example, communication links that are being developed under the stress and under in the front line of Ukraine, which are currently being radio jammed and GNS denied, and GPS signals are being spoofed. So those kind of technologies being developed for defense application or commercial applications are now coming together and are even much more stronger together than alone. So that's how I look at defense technologies.
Excellent. Within that landscape, there is obviously a huge range of emerging technologies. What types of technologies are you most excited about right now? Autonomy, cyber, native AI systems, space, and anything that you are
So
currently excited about?
that's a great question. So we are following, first of all, the NATO capabilities and the European Defence Fund calls. So we always focus on a broader level what the NATO capabilities are needed for the next years. And then within those capabilities, I get excited by a couple of things. First of all, it's the autonomous software stack of drones or unmanned platforms. Currently, there are a lot of new platforms, UAVs, USVs, UGVs being built. So ground vehicles, sea vehicles, or vehicles that are being developed into the air. But currently, the brain of those systems are within the autopilot and within the software that is running on top of those drones. And I've really composited like the drone system and trying to find what kind of new AI models can we implement on those systems as well. So all the new AI edge on the cloud or those kind of federated learning platforms, I'm trying to implement and see how we can make drones for the air, sea, and ground domain much more smarter, faster, more efficient, and also being trained on a lot of data as well, because we need to make those systems really top edge, top notch, and therefore you need also a lot of data. So I'm actually looking a lot in that area. That's one. And the other area is skilled and adaptive manufacturing. I think currently in Europe, we have a lot of facilities, we have a lot of production facilities, but we need to see, and we see that we're expanding right now, but we're running around and we're running against a couple of walls. And there are big bottlenecks and challenges in the European supply chain. For example, in critical minerals, in batteries, in shells
Right.
for ammunition. And those kind of things are not always the typical venture capital case where you think of, but that's exactly the play that we can also do, because those are the problems, as I said earlier, that are facing Europe right now, and those are the problems we need to solve.
Great. Very thoughtful response to that. Um, a follow-up question here. What are you personally most excited about right now in Europe defense and security technology? Specific technologies, capabilities, or types of founders?
What I think as well, I get really excited from founders who have a really strong operational background, that they are
Mhm.
really, that they live the problem, that they understand the urgency of the problem as well, and that they are able to thrive themselves through the complex ecosystem. And that's why, for example, founders that have already done a military experience sometimes can faster adapt and sell into procurement cycles because they speak the same language. So that's on the founder profile that I liked a lot. On technologies, I think an area that's being a little bit undervalued is the mobilization and the logistical change. Currently, the MODs across Europe, so the Ministry of Defense, are running on systems that are 10 years older or maybe even older than that one. And we need to have new capabilities and artificial intelligence and fundamental models for AI being trained and being sold to the governments in Europe. And currently that is being done in America. That's where America is a front runner on the European. And I think there's a big opportunity to solve the back office of the governments with artificial intelligence and fundamental models.
Excellent. And alongside that excitement, investors also spend a lot of time scanning what's coming next. So what trends or segments are you tracking most closely at the moment, even if you haven't invested there yet?
So currently we had the first close in November, and we are
Mhm.
already since November are actively investing in a couple of areas as well. So we invest in really the space technologies. I think situational awareness is a really exciting area where we are diving really deep. On the other hand, what I discussed already is the autonomous software platforms and stacks within the unmanned systems. We're still looking as well, and there are a portfolio company of us that is doing the data orchestration. So you can eventually, with one operator, can do 10 or 20 drones together, instead of for every operator you need a drone. So those kind of things we get really excited about, and there are many other things, because we are as keen are looking at the full defense ecosystem. So there are many opportunities and technologies where we get excited about.
Great. And thinking longer term, is there an area within defense or security where you will believe Europe has a realistic opportunity and lead globally over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the first answer that you will hear from a lot of people is that we need to be better at AI and we need to be better at quantum. But those kind of things I truly believe, but there are not the best answers, because I think there's currently really an undervalued maritime domain in Europe, we are exposed to the Atlantic and the Nordic Sea as well, and we need to be able to counter the threat and also be much stronger in our navy capabilities that we already developed for many decades as well. So that's an area, and I also think there's an area in adaptive and skilled manufacturing, because we have so many countries that are producing their own stuff. Now we need to work together on the NATO standards. We need to work and collaborate more between the primes and between the countries. And therefore, I think on the production and supply chain of Europe, we can make it much more sovereign, and we are no longer needed to be dependent on China for materials or electronics, and we need to also not be dependent on America for technological support.
Great, thank you for highlighting that, Thies. Let's shift gears slightly and talk about scaling companies in this space. How do you help founders think transatlantic early, especially in defense, where regulation and procurement differ so much?
So what I think is really important, and that's also where we already try to push the founders to, is to make really strong co-investors, partnerships, and build institutional credibility since day one, which means that eventually we want to connect founders not only within their own operational background and regional background where they come from. So, for example, a Dutch founder will be really good selling to the Dutch MOD and eventually become a Dutch champion, but we need to create European champions. We need to create cross-border collaborations between ministries of defense and between the founders and the companies we invest in. So therefore, what we really try to push is, for example, to make cross selections or cross partnerships with a defense prime in another country that helps them connect to the local ecosystem. And by establishing connection with the local ecosystem, it's way easier for you to sell into that particular government. It's really difficult to just sell to 5 different governments without getting the same people or understanding how that government is functioning. So that is something that we really try to help founders and entrepreneurs with, and that's also why we have a dedicated adoption and keen defense academies, because we really care about the ecosystem and about this adoption play for the founders.
Great. I really like the fact that importance of cross-border collaboration is more critical in this phase. Now, what role does institutional understanding, ministries, procurement systems, policy play in scaling defense companies?
I think it's a make or break. It's really necessary. I think the institutional play changed also a lot in the last 5 years. We have seen that ESG frameworks, human rights frameworks, and all kind of other capabilities and definitions that are being set out by big institutions has been changed, being more dynamic to the current geopolitical reality. And that also helped a lot with our fund to be operational and to be able to invest this amount of capital into these kind of companies as well. And I think the institutional play, let's put it this way, like what NATO is doing, with a much more innovative approach with the NATO Diana program, with the NIF fund that is supporting those countries as well. And what you see as well with there is when a country goes through the Diana accelerator, you give it a physical stamp. Hey, this company is NATO credible. We need to able to sell into other MODs, and it will be much more helpful when the company went through that Diana funnel. So there's a lot of exciting things right now that are happening, and a lot of things are changing, all because of institutional play and pressure from there.
Great. That leads nicely into the broader evolution of defense investing itself. Now let's talk about the conviction, risk, long-term value, and founder advice. Defense investing is used to be out of bounds for many VCs. What changed culturally and institutionally?
I think it almost became a question because the geopolitical landscape is so fluctuated right now. There's so much chaos in the world, and we have seen that in Ukraine that if you're not supporting Ukraine with Western supplies, that they won't get or won't survive for a long time. So therefore, we need to constantly able to help each other out, and that is changed a lot, because in 5 6 years ago, those countries were still having conversations. Are we going to support? Are we going to spend more time and more money into defense? And currently, all those conversations are being converted into conversations about how much money we're going to deploy, how much procurement adaptation we're going to do, how much more technology can we implement to the defense industry right now. So all those conversations, from frameworks to definitions, are all being changed over the last couple of years. So that's I think big momentum, and I think that's typically changed institutional play.
Great. And for founders entering this space today, that shift creates both opportunity and complexity.
Mhm.
If a founder in Europe is building in defense or security today, what should they focus on much earlier than they typically do?
I think a really important thing here is customer relationship. You need to be able to talk to your end user. You need to be able to understand what you're selling and why it's really needed, and why it's an urgency that the people that are using your product are eventually needed so hard. So, for example, in the beginning of the war in Ukraine, you saw a lot of Western startups or primes selling their stuff to Ukraine without being operational there, without having the connections, without talking to the people to really understand what is needed, and how fast the production and innovation cycles now go in Ukraine. They were selling stuff to Ukraine which were already being outdated there, because the war is changing so much, technology is changing. So therefore, I think the customer relationship you should have as a founder, be able to understand the military need and be able to really understand the critical urgency of that need as well. So I think that's the key for founders in the beginning of their journey, is not to build a tech and then think, hey, to who am I going to sell it right now? It's more about understanding to who you're selling firstly, and building the tech around that need.
Great. Thank you so much. I think these are very crucial insights for founders building defense and security startups.
Mhm.
And to close on a forward-looking note, what excites you most about the next generation of European founders?
I think there's a lot of engineering talent and engineering skills being used right now. Robotics is being on an extremely rise as well. Um, Robotics for the defense industry, for industrialization, and you need, those are all really deep tech, hard tech, engineering, hardware solutions, and problems that needs to be solved. So those are the founders where I really get excited about, that dare to take on those challenges. And of course, software layers are really interesting, and our capabilities and things that will need to be supported, and we are investing in them as well. But we're even really focusing now on the reality of the defense industry, and therefore you need to have hardware capabilities as well. So that's the founders I get really excited about for the next coming years ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Tees. This has been a really insightful conversation. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the broader mission of building stronger and more resilient Europe to the launch of Keen's dedicated defense and security fund, and the technologies and founders that are shaping the next wave of innovation in this space. It's clear that defense and security tech is entering a very different phase in Europe, and one where venture capital, deep technology, and institutional support are starting to align in ways we haven't seen before.
Mm.
And hearing how Keen is thinking about conviction, long-term value, and supporting founders through that journey has been incredibly valuable. So thank you again for joining us, for sharing your perspective with our audience. We are excited to see how the ecosystem evolves and to follow the work that you and the team at Keen Venture Partners continue to do in supporting the next generation of European defense technology champions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was an honor. And if there's founders or other people that are building something in defense, happy to speak with everyone about it.